Welcome to the Recovery Stories podcast, bringing you stories of hope, healing, and triumph over the bondage of addictions, mental health struggles, trauma, and dysfunctional family systems. Our courageous storytellers have chosen to live their journey out loud in order to show others that they don't have to suffer in silence. The stories you will hear are raw, real, and may involve graphic and triggering content. This podcast is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health's Rooted alumni community. If you or a loved one are struggling, have questions, or are ready to take the next step, call our admission center at 888-648-4098 or visit us online at www.promisesbehavioralhealth.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Rooted Recovery Stories. My name is Patrick Custer and I'm your host. Welcome to each of you, whether you're watching or listening live or on replay later. We're so glad that you're here and hope you stick around for this full episode. I'm really excited today to introduce our guest, a dear friend of mine, a birthday twin and a colleague, Courtney Grimes from Nashville, Tennessee. She's the owner and founder of The Collective, which we'll talk about a little bit later, a therapist extraordinaire, and the clinical director of a really, really neat, impactful program in Nashville called Renewed. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get further into it. Courtney, welcome, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Absolutely. So, I do this introduction, but I want to get down to it for our listeners. This is about you and your story, and I just want to turn the floor over and let you take it away. So wherever you want to begin, let's hear about it.
Sure. Recovery stories are long and tangled, aren't they?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Well, like you said, I lived in Nashville for about 23 years, but I was born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. In the Stone Mountain area. So my family is all still there. And then I came up to Nashville in the late 90s. And my family growing up was pretty prototypical, I think, for kind of middle upper class white Americana in the South. It was pretty, right? It was pretty... what you would imagine is probably, what we were. My parents met in 10th grade and then got married when they were 21 years old. So the two of them really, and they're still married now, 52 years. They've never really known life without each other, right? Especially adult life, especially when they had kids. So by the time I came along, I was the firstborn, and by the time I came along, I think they had kind of a little dynamic that was already pretty much established between the two of them. Mm-hmm. And that essentially was, my dad was sort of the dominant leader, and my mom kind of goes along with what dad likes. My father is a retired lieutenant colonel in the Army. And he is a commercial real estate litigator, if that gives you any sort of clue sort of to how his personality was growing up. I remember when we were little, my little brother and I, we'd be asleep in the morning and my dad would come to the top of the stairs in front of our bedroom doors and just scream, he'd be like, "Front and center, maggots!" And we'd have to run in the hall and salute him and say, "Yes, we're up. Yep, thank you." So it was pretty much a kind of militant household growing up. Yeah. My dad also came from a family of abuse. His father was very abusive to him and his siblings. And so I think that's kind of how he understood discipline. I also think, sadly, it's how he understood love. And then my mom, like I said, they kind of had this dynamic where she just sort of goes with what he decides and what he says.
I think that a lot of people, I know I can relate to that like my same family dynamic. My mom's a class A codependent, and the number one place where I learned my coping skills of codependency from, I think probably a lot of other people watching and listening can identify with that as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Sure. We come by this really naturally, don't we? Yeah, exactly. So I think that, as the abuse started with me and my brother, I think that it wasn't ever really questioned a whole lot. It wasn't ever really pushed back on, as at least, from my mother's part, because it was what dad wanted. It was how dad thought the kids should be raised, et cetera, et cetera. That's how he was raised. When my little brother was born, I was 3.5 years old, and the dynamic in the house shifted radically. My brother was born with ADHD, and in the early 80s, that really wasn't anything that was talked about. We didn't know a whole lot about it. Medication was still relatively new, comparatively. So needless to say, he was a huge behavior problem. Like, he was a problem. He was a problem. Teachers couldn't keep him in his classroom. Sunday school teachers can't keep him at church. Like, he's always getting in trouble, always getting sent home. And of course, my father's answer to that is physical discipline. Well, as the dynamic in the home started to shift to focus mostly around him, I was the older sibling, and there wasn't anything quote unquote wrong with me. Right. So she can kind of take care of herself. She's good. She can sort of, she's good because Chris really needs the parenting, and Chris really needs.
How much older were you than him?
3.5 years, almost 4 years. Mm-hmm. So moving through elementary school, middle school, it was just understood. Chris ran the house, and Chris got the attention and got the parenting, and Courtney's fine. I mean, she's got it. She makes good grades. She doesn't get in trouble. Everything's fine. Well, if you take that dynamic, especially in a household with an abusive father and a little girl, watching how that would play out with Chris, and watching how my dad would answer everything with abuse, whether it was verbal, physical, psychological, emotional, whatever it was kind of smackdown, right? That's really scary to a little girl. That's like really, really scary. To the point where, I'm an adult. I'm middle-aged, and I still can't. I have a hard time hearing male screaming. Like, even in movies, I kind of have a trauma response sometimes to that. So it was really scary. It was really, really scary. And I remember kind of putting together different mechanisms to stay safe. Right. So, if I brought home a B on a report card, it was, is that your best? Is that really your best? I wanted to do anything I could to kind of stay under the radar, stay out of his line of sight, make sure I didn't upset my mother, because if my mother was upset, here comes dad, so that dynamic was kind of learned, I think, pretty early. I also bore this burden, and it was never, I don't know how to say this. It was never explicitly said. It was never explicitly talked about. But from the outside looking in on our family, we had everything together, right? It was just sort of like this perfect Southern family. And with my brother creating so much drama and negative attention on the family, it was sort of Courtney's job to be the good one.
Balance it. Yeah.
That's right. And it was never directly said. It was never directly spoken about. Yet somehow you just know. So it was my job to make sure we look good, and it was my job to stay safe. So what is it?
Well, I have a question.
Yeah.
And as you move through this, because I know this about your story, right? That you went from a point of having to do your best on the normal things that are asked of a kid, like going to school, getting good grades, that kind of thing. There was a transition where you started to do extra things, extracurricular outside of that, where perfection came up as well. So I'm interested, as you go into this next phase and talk about the things that, those things that you started to develop in, which in a balanced way can be really healthy for a kid. But, when did just getting your best grade become not enough, and you had to start doing the singing, was it track, all of that, the sports, the running, all of extra things came into play for you. So I'm interested to find out, when that transition happened for you and your
Yeah.
new identifier.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of came about in high school. And I think by
Okay.
the time I was a teenager, the rage, the episodes of rage from my father. I mean, Patrick, I have memories. My little brother was on one side of a wall, his bedroom was, and my bedroom was on the other side of that shared wall. And I've got memories of like being in my bed as a little kid, hiding under my covers, hearing my brother just shriek next door because dad was over there beating the crap out of this kid. And it's just, I can't even begin to tell you how terrifying that is. So because my dad was a product of abuse, he naturally had a rage issue. And so as I was getting really good grades, as I was learning how to perform to stay safe, guess what? He's still coming home and having rage issues. As a child, you don't know that has nothing to do with you.
Yeah.
Right? Because children internalize everything. So how I internalized that was, well, this isn't enough. I mean, obviously I can do more. I can be better. So by the time I got to high school, I had been trained classically in piano since I was 4 years old. I started training in opera, swim team. I was homecoming queen. I was prom queen. I was beta club president. It was all these things. And it wasn't ever like, oh my God, I think I'm so great because of it. It was like, I would do one thing and the rage kept coming. So I'm like, oh God, well, I guess I need to do more. It's not enough. It's like never enough, never enough.
Yeah.
So by the time I was probably a senior in high school, I was 17 and started to really realize how out of control things were and how silent my mother was being all of these years, not really, putting herself between him and her kids ever because of the codependent, right? Because of the codependency and because of the subservient. That was just and I mean, I think too, to be fair, I think a lot of that is a cultural dynamic, kind of old school Southern ladies, right? Like you sort of defer to. So I think there was just a lot of factors at play. And by the time I was a senior, my high school resume was 30 miles long. And I was the best at everything, except I never realized that. I always thought that I wasn't doing enough. Because what that feels like is you can be faster, you can be stronger, you can be prettier, you can be more popular, you can be more successful. And finally, you will feel worthy and you will feel loved. If you can just meet that bar, if you can just get there, then everything's going to be okay. And I see that now with a lot of my clients. I call it destination happiness, where they'll say, if I can just graduate high school, then everything's going to be fine, right? And they graduate high school and then they get to college. You know what? Academia is not my thing. Once I get out of college, I'll start working, then I'll be happy. They start working, they're not happy. Well, I need to get married. Well, I need to have a baby. Well, I need to make more money. Well, I need to drive this car. It's, and they postpone this idea of ever being settled in your life. And that's what I was doing too. I think a lot of us do that. And by the time I left for college, my senior year of high school, and then like around when I left for college, I had started flirting a little bit with dieting. And looking back, it was a very obvious response to trying to gain some kind of control over my life, trying to feel in charge of my safety in some way. And food, weight, calories, body, and all that stuff is a really great, good girl way.
Yeah.
Right. To sort of flirt with depression and anxiety treatment, right? It's like, it's really good too, because it's measured. Everything is very measured and calculated. And so through the calorie counting and through the weighing your food and pounds lost and miles ran and all these kinds of things that started to sort of filter into my world, there are very measurable mathematical ways to see that you are in control and succeeding.
Yeah.
Right. My mom had been a chronic dieter my whole life, which I think, again, is very American female, sadly. It's very much our culture here. When I was in, I think, 8th grade or 9th grade, maybe, she had a locksmith come to our house and put drill a padlock onto the refrigerator to padlock the door shut. And then each week, Chris and I had the responsibility of going and hiding the key in a different place to make sure that she could not get into the refrigerator. So I think, again, by the time I left home, I was 17, that's how clearly I missed it. I should have started this years ago, right, Courtney?
Yeah.
Man, this is what you should have done this whole time, right?
Yeah.
So then I'm in Atlanta, right? And everybody in Atlanta kind of picks up and goes to Athens the way everybody in Nashville picks up and goes to Knoxville.
So, sorry, I just have these thoughts sometimes that I really feel
Yeah.
like I have to interject this. You were being told this message at such a young age that we are not safe in our bodies.
No. And you are not okay.
And you're not okay.
And you're not okay.
And you and you're going to have to constantly seek outside control mechanisms. And,
feel safe.
like there's sorry, I just wanted to serve that moment here, like some reverence because of how, and you're not the first person I've heard about this from happening with a parent in their food, the food restriction, the lock on the refrigerator and the cabinets and things like that. But the impact that has on anyone living in the household, especially the children, wow.
It sets them up for dysfunction the rest of their lives. And the families that I get to work with through my practice, I always tell the moms, don't model a dysfunctional relationship with food to your kids. Don't model dysfunctional relationships to your kids. And I'll have moms be like, well, I mean, I never criticize my daughter's weight. I never talk about her food, yada, yada, yada. And I'll say, right, but do you criticize you? Do you talk about how fat and ugly and terrible you are and how much you need to lose weight? Because your little girl idolizes you, thinks you are everything. And if you're saying that about yourself, what must mom think about me? Right? And so that births that inner narrative that is a lifetime struggle. I mean, it's for the rest of your life that, becomes your inner critic. That's the piece of you that's am I good enough? Am I ever good enough?
Yes. Thank you for elaborating on that because I just think it helps set some perspective for the stage for the next few years you're about to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you leave to go to Athens, Georgia, which, I think had 40,000 kids. It was a city. It felt like another city, but it was all just a college campus. And I had grown up relatively protected in this little sort of Methodist church bubble, right? And so here I am on this giant campus being exposed to life stories and backgrounds from people all over the country. And I didn't know. I didn't know about any of it. I remember pledging a sorority because that's what, girls like me, that's what we do. Yeah. I didn't really even want to, but I thought this is, I can't not do it because that's failure, right? And then I won't be safe. So, and then I'll be happy. I know I just need to be in a sorority and then I'll feel okay. Doesn't happen. So I remember being in this pledge class full of, I think 50 or 60 girls in there, and gorgeous girls, all of them just incredible human beings. And of course they all made me feel about 2 inches tall, because here I'm coming back with this narrative that I'm never enough. I'm not safe. I'm not worthy of love. I can't ever achieve what I need to achieve to be okay and to feel okay. The inner critic really fired up, really, really got pretty loud. And I remember joining these girls. There were like maybe 6 or 7 of these girls who would start running, and they would get up really early in the morning and they would run together. And I thought, well, that's awesome, because if I could run with them, then they're going to like me. And then I'll have friends, and then I'll feel great. I'll feel like I fit in, right?
Yeah.
Now keep in mind, when the running group started, this was freshman year of college, so I'm 17, 18 years old, and no inner work has been done. I didn't even know that was even such a thing yet. I didn't have any idea about inner work. I had no clue. Everything was external solutions. So as I started running, I started losing weight. As I developed a college social life, I started drinking. And I remember figuring out maybe Christmas time of that year that I could sub out alcohol calories for food calories, and then I could just go run them off. And look, I'm losing this weight, and like everybody, like boys are talking to me, and these girls are like, so like I'm invited to their parties, their birthday part. Like this is working. This is what I've been with. Mom had it right the whole time. If you just lose weight, people love you. The skinnier you are, the more love you get. Perfect. That's a formula I can get behind. So fast forward about 2 more years, and I am drunk most every day, most every night, sometimes making it to my classes, most of the time not making it to my classes, chain smoking, just living my best life,
I did
running.
not know that you were a smoker.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm only smiling about that because I'm a former smoker too, and there's a part
I mean,
of
it was
me
just like, yeah. Oh, but Patrick, I was an opera major.
Oh
Making
gosh.
awesome choices.
Yep.
And, just losing weight like a champ. And it was about that time that I got a phone call from my dad in Atlanta. He had received a letter in the mail from the university stating that I had lost my scholarship, and I was on academic probation. And to date, that is one of the scariest days of my life. I thought I was going to die. I thought he's going to come through this phone. He's going to murder me, because not only had I very acutely failed, I had very publicly failed. So now it wasn't like, oh, I just didn't meet the bar that I was supposed to meet, but now it makes them look bad. It's what Chris dealt with growing up, right? Like you can't, people can't know about this. It was very much like that, right? And so we put that in air quotes for those of you who are listening. We decided it was best if I left Athens. That's the time when I moved to Nashville. And it was, again, in the late 90s. And here I come charging into Nashville. Back then, for those of you living in Nashville in the 90s, it was like us, Reba, and some cows. And that was about it. I'm like, what the hell have I done? This place, this is horrible.
You could count our skyscrapers on one hand, and skyscrapers, using the term skyscrapers is stretching it just a little bit.
4-story building.
And I don't know that Party Bus was even a thing yet. So like all the things people associate with Nashville were not, other than honky tonk. I think those have probably been around since we had buildings.
But they were all dusty and weird back then. Do you know what I mean? It was just some like creepy old guy in the corner, and you're like, it was like that, it was like that. Yep. So yeah, we've come a long way. We have a Crate and Barrel now. We're like a real city. So back then there was just like nothing. And I'm like, oh my God, this is awful. So I knew no one here. I was so self-conscious. I was so embarrassed. I was so ashamed that I had let everybody down. I felt I was like run out of town. She can't be in Atlanta. She can't be here anymore. That's kind of, it felt like that. Right. And so
what's even almost worse is something unsaid, but communicated.
Oh my God. Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Like when something takes place and it's like understood what you're describing, I think in many instances is so much more hurtful than someone just saying, hey, we're kind of uncomfortable. You made our lives uncomfortable with your choices. We think it'd be better for you to take a whatever, but not even like, it was more of what you're describing being that like, we're just going to set this up. You get it because you failed. Like, we're not saying that, but it just isolates you even more.
Yeah,
right?
You are not wrong. You're not wrong. And it drives home that, like, I knew it. I knew I was a total piece of crap. I knew it. Nobody, like you said, nobody ever said that, but it was just, I knew it. And here's finally the proof. This is it. Yeah. So here I am living in the middle of nowhere, waiting tables, trying to get a job, and living in this like little room that I would just come home to every day and stay in that room. I was financially responsible for myself. I was paying my rent. I was paying for food, paying for gas. And I remember making such little money waiting tables that it would be easy to cut back on food because food's expensive. Right. So the eating disorder really, I think, latched onto me to be really honest with you, in that isolation. It was that about a year. Yeah, 10, 12 months right in there, where it just really got a hold of my soul, like my cells. I would challenge myself every day to see how little food I could get by on every day, to manage the depression, to manage the anxiety. I would run because I'd picked that up a couple years before with the girls, right? And I wanted to lose some more weight because, well, we know what happens when you lose weight. People love you, and I'll have friends, and maybe I'll have a boyfriend, and then I won't be lonely anymore. To date, I stand by the fact that mental illness blossoms and blooms in isolation. I think loneliness breeds despair. And I think despair gets managed in a bunch of really creative ways.
Yeah.
Like starving yourself to death.
Yep.
I heard anorexia nervosa once be called the most elegant form of suicide.
Wow.
And that really kind of punched me in the face, because that's exactly what it is. You're not actively trying to die, but like, you'd be kind of cool if you just did. It'd be cool if you just did. That's kind of what it feels like. That would be fine. You know? And you just slowly.
I've heard you say before regarding the anorexia and deaths and in relation to mental health. Is it the number one mortality mental diagnosis?
Out of every mental health diagnosis, eating disorders has the highest mortality rate. Everybody thinks it's depression and suicide. It is not. It's eating disorders, because when you starve yourself long enough and you have no energy coming in to the animal, and there's no stored energy anymore for the animal to burn off, to use to keep a brain thinking and lungs breathing and a heart beating, the animal that you live in starts to eat its own muscle to stay alive. And your heart is one of the biggest, strongest muscles that you have. And so your heart will start to disintegrate because it's being eaten by the animal for fuel. Gross, but weird, but true.
And cardiac muscle doesn't, those cells lost don't replicate, I don't think. Like when we lose, when those cells die, we don't get new ones. There's like a couple different cells in the body that aren't ones that replicate. So like if that's why, like, you know, part of your heart dies, it's
in every sense of that phrase.
it dies.
Yeah.
But I'm 99.999% sure that I'm right on that fact. If anybody's listening and can prove me wrong, okay. Well, it's not the first time I've said something wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm right on that.
And I think that's what's so terrifying too, is even now, being recovered from this addiction, the long-term health effects from going through this are endless. I can't do any high impact sports. I can barely walk up and down stairs. My knees creak and hurt so bad from abusing running for so many years, because you just wear the cartilage down. I don't really have a lot left, and my cartilage does not regenerate either. Right. I will always be kind of predisposed to heart conditions. I'm an easy target for a heart attack. It'll be that's my life. That's the rest of my life, however long or short it is. So to make conscious decisions when you are in an eating disorder, and I want to be really clear that eating disorders are addiction. Like that is an addiction. We call them process addictions. So it's different from like a chemical dependency. Process addictions, especially like eating disorders, are really difficult to recover from, because you can't eliminate the substance that you have the addictive relationship with. Right? You have to keep food. So whereas part of my process was to kind of recover from alcohol as well. I can cut that out.
Yeah.
You can eliminate that. So you can't eliminate food. So I'm moving around in Nashville, and I'm just slowly disintegrating. I'm just starving myself every day. I'm so lonely. I absolutely hate myself. I've completely embarrassed my family. I have no friends. My clothes start falling. I mean, I can't even wear my clothes anymore. Everything's getting really, really big. I made a couple of girlfriends at one of my first jobs in the music industry. I was working at a record label and doing PR for some artists at a record label. And I'd made a couple of girlfriends, and I was so grateful for them, but also I never did anything with them that revolved around food because I couldn't, because I didn't trust myself at that point to be around food and not not binge. I used to have binges, Patrick, where I would like black out. I would lose time and come to and be like, what the hell did I just do? Oh my God, what did I just eat? Just mountains and mountains, unfathomable amounts of food. And so then,
like straight up blackout, wake up in the middle of the kitchen.
Like I don't remember. But when you wake up and there's bags and boxes and crumbs and all these things everywhere, you're like, oh, well, something happened here.
Yeah.
It's insane how like the computer, the brain will shut down and the animal kind of takes over. But then, you come to and realize what you've done, and it just exacerbates the shame. And I can't believe I did that. I have no control. I'm such a piece of crap, and that shame spirals out, and then you've got to get rid of it and then punish yourself by not eating and, running 4 times a day for the next 2 weeks. There were weeks at a time. Sometimes I would survive off like coffee and gum.
Wow.
Like it was bad. It was bad. I've had to throw away a lot of the photos of myself from that time. And it was a skeleton. I was a skeleton with skin hanging off of it. It was just not, it was very upsetting. Of course, I'm looking in the mirror thinking like, what a whale. You're so fat. No wonder no one loves you. Right. That's the narrative that had been built all this time. So I'm sitting at work one day. I'm 21, 22, something like that. And I get a phone call from one of these girls. And again, I'm not going to wedding showers. I'm not going to birthday parties. I didn't go home to see my family for a lot of reasons. But primarily because holidays, to go home, it's all food. So I couldn't go. Handing me a plate of food at that point in my addiction was like handing me a plate of live spiders, being like, what is your problem? Why don't you just eat that? And I'm watching everybody else around me eat plates of live spiders, and it's like phobic. You're like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, right?
Yeah.
So I get this phone call at work one day, and it's a girlfriend of mine, and she's like sobbing, like ugly crying, like snotty. I can't understand her words. I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? Are you okay? I'm okay. I'm like, what's happening? Is your apartment on fire? No, and she's just trying to talk. And I'm like, I can't, what? I'm like, has there been a car accident? What's going on? And then finally she gets out. We are just so worried about you. And the only word I heard was we. So I fire back at her. I'm like, we? Are y'all talking about? Who's talking about me? That's really...
her and her invisible army.
That's
I love
really
that Brene Brown talks about that all the time.
I cannot believe you guys have been talking about me, worried about me. Who's saying what? Like, whatever. Like, that's all I heard, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not well. I'm not... I can't hear concern. All I hear is judgment. That's it. That's all anything ever sounds like to me at that point in time. She not so politely told me that she had made an appointment for me the next day at the Vanderbilt Eating Disorders unit, pediatric unit, because that's the only thing that really this whole part of the country had at that point in time to serve clients with eating disorders. This is kids. And I said, I'm not going. And she said, you are going, and I'm picking you up tomorrow at work. Your appointment's at 3:30. So fast forward to the next day, and I'm sitting there, and I'm just like, my leg is just shaking like a million miles an hour.
I bet you were just so nice.
I'm livid. I'm so pissed. And Lisa is the receptionist at the front desk, and I hear my phone on my desk back in my office. It's like beep. And Lisa goes, Courtney, somebody's here for you. And I just screamed down the hall. I know she's here for me. I know. So fuck no. You know what? I'm going to go. This doctor's going to tell me that I'm so healthy because I'm so healthy and you guys don't even know. Like, I'm sorry that you're jealous that I'm so healthy and I'm like a runner and I like eat so clean and like I can't help it. Like, I'm so much better than you guys. Okay. So whatever. We're going to go. So I go out, get in the car, and I'm, in the passenger seat, and I've got my arms crossed and I'm like just staring out the window, just pouting. I'm just giving her my best cold shoulder, and she's just driving, just like crying over there. We get to the doctor's office, and of course it's a pediatrician. So there's like there's like this giant like fish tank that's like electric blue. You know what I mean? There's like those cutout cartoon things that are like taped to the wall. Remember those Highlights magazines?
Oh yeah.
And it was like Word Find, and like there's Where's Waldo. And so we're sitting in the chairs in the waiting room, and it's my friend, her name's Cheryl. Cheryl's sitting here. I'm to the right of Cheryl. There's like a 10-year-old boy to my right, and his mom is on the other side of him. And I'm like, I've got my back to Cheryl, and so I'm kind of all up on this kid. I'm like looking over. Yeah, I'm like, I don't know. Like, little boy, we don't like her. This woman is the devil, so don't look at her.
You're forming alliances against you.
Oh, yeah, we're forming alliances. I'm like, she's dead to me. No, this is no. So, and I'm looking over this kid's shoulder, and he's doing like the Where's Waldo thing in the Highlights magazine. And I mean, Waldo's like right there. I mean, this kid's an idiot, clearly. And so I'm just like irritated with her. I'm irritated with this kid's stupidity. He can't see. I'm like, Waldo's right there. Mom's like, okay, all right. Gets her kid, and they move to the other side of the fish tank. And I'm like, I don't. So finally the nurse comes and gets me. And, I'm 10 years older than any other patient there. And the Band-Aids have, like dinosaurs on them. So she pulls me back into the little, where they get your vitals, they do the cuff, and she has to get my weight. So she puts me up on the scale, and it's not one of those digital scales that you can sort of mess with at home. Like, it's one of those big metal, like with the chunky bar, and you like slide the weight down with your finger. It's like that. And she puts me up there, Patrick, and turns me around backwards. So my back is to that. And all I hear is clink, clink, clink as she's moving these weights around. And in my mind, I'm like, well, there's another 100 pounds. There's another 100 pounds. God, I'm a fat cow. So I finally get back into the examination room, and I'm sitting on that paper, and you have to like put the robe on that doesn't close all the way in the back. And it's just like mortifying. And I'm like, I've got stuff to do. I'm a very busy person. I've got to run. This is really cutting into my run time. I'm very busy. You guys just don't understand. So the door finally opens, and in walks the hottest man I've ever seen in my life. This like Cuban looking dude. He's got a white coat on and a stethoscope. He's like, "Hi, I'm Dr. Bermudez." And I'm like, "Of course you are. Of course, this is my life. Of course, this is my life." I always tease him because he and I are still really good friends. And I always tease him and his wife. I'm like, "I had such a crush on you when I was like 21. And and I said, "It's probably good you work with kids." And he came in and kind of ran through all the questions that he's supposed to ask me. What do I eat in a day? How much am I exercising? When was my last blood workup? On and on and on and on. And then he wants to listen to my heart. So he takes that stethoscope or off of his neck, and he puts it on, and then he's putting that cold little pad, on my chest. And he starts obviously over my heart. And then I remember this, he goes over to the right side of my chest. He's having me lift my arms up, and he's placing it like up under my arms. He's doing my neck. At one point, there were two nurses standing on the other side of our closed door, like they were on the hallway talking. And he opened the door and asked them to be quiet and move away from the door. And he came back in and put the stethoscope like around back on my lungs on the back. And in a second, he came walking around the front, and he sat down on the little rolly stool. When he rolls up, and he was like, "I can't find a heartbeat on you. I can't hear it." And so me being, the little gem that I was,
right.
Said, "Well, you're really bad at your job." Yeah. And he said, this was like around like Halloween of that year.
Yeah.
And he said, "Honey, I don't know what you're doing to yourself." He said, and he kind of held up the clipboard where he'd been writing down all my answers. He goes, "I don't know if you're lying to me about this. I don't know if you're being truthful." He goes, "Here's what I know. Whatever you are doing to yourself, if you keep doing this to yourself, you will be dead by Christmas." And I went, "What?" I had no earthly idea what he was talking about. And that is who told me about your heart. He said, Courtney, you don't put any energy into your body, and you're expending energy like 3 or 4 times the amount that you should be. And there's no more energy stored on your body to use. So your body is eating your muscle. Your heart has disintegrated to the point where it's so small and it's so weak that I can't hear it. He wanted to send me to rehab. And I said, absolutely not. I said, absolutely not. I'm over 18. You can't make me do anything. And he said, well, you have what's called anorexia nervosa. And that means you have a mental illness. So if you don't do what I say, I can file for power of attorney as your doctor and start band-aiding medical treatment for you. And I said, that sounds legit.
Yeah.
And he goes, if you don't go to rehab, I want to see you in this office every single day. So we put together this plan because, again, resources were so limited for stuff like that back then, right? There was like one place in California. I'm like, I can't go out there. My parents will find out. Like, I can't do that.
Right.
That to me felt like a death sentence. So he found me a counselor, and I saw her 3 times a week. He found me a nutritionist, and I saw her twice a week. And then I went into that hospital room every single day to get vitals and to get weighed. And he said, if you lose a fraction of a pound, he goes, I'm going to have to call your parents. And I was like, oh my God, just that threat alone. I mean, I was, and that started a long, tedious, painful recovery process. It hurts to restore weight. It hurts like physically is painful. There's something called refeeding syndrome. Your body is reacting to like coming back online again. And that's not a pleasant experience. It was awful. It was awful. It was awful.
What are some of the things involved with that? Like, do you get headaches? Is it, some of the symptoms that are caused during refeeding syndrome?
A lot of headaches. My heart would beat like really, really fast and hurt really fast sometimes. Sometimes I'd be short of breath. There's a lot of bloating, like your body just sort of like distends. It looks like you're pregnant. Like for females, it sort of looks like because all of the food is there before your body can appropriately metabolize. Like it's just, it hurts. It hurts. It feels like your skin sometimes is sore because everything's sort of like stretching back into place. You're moving out of survival mode, and that hurts for a little while. It hurts and that's what I tell people that I, start to work with. I'm like, hang on, dude, because this is not going to be cool for a little while.
Yeah.
It's not for the weak and weary, that's for sure. But it's absolutely the best thing, obviously, I've ever done in my life. It's worth every drop of pain. And when I got through my recovery, life being recovered is so extraordinary and so magnificent. I went back to school and got a whole second round of degrees to be able to go treat mental illness, treat depression, treat eating disorders, treat anxiety, teach people, show people what's available to them, because I never knew. I didn't know this kind of life was ever possible, especially for somebody like me. And so that's what I will spend the rest of my life doing.
I love that. That's so awesome. I have one question just to backpedal for just a second.
Yeah.
When talking about, everybody's journey pre-recovery is so different, and everybody's journey at the beginning of recovery is so different. But what one of the things I like to know about is, for you, what was the can you talk a little bit about, at first, when you get into recovery, most of us find our way in, no matter what it's from, through the pressure of those around us saying, hey, you're the last person to find out that something is severely wrong with you. And we kind of go, fine.
Mhm.
Right? Like that's
Mhm.
kind of where we are for the first little while. Some
Mhm.
people are really blessed and lucky that
Mhm.
they find this radical acceptance and surrender from the get-go.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I'm kind of interested to hear about if you could just share a little bit about like what that part of your surrender journey,
Oh
right?
my
What was
God.
it
I
like
mean,
at first, and when was that pivotal moment for you where it went from I'm having to do this to I'm wanting to do this
oh,
because
what
I
a great question. I mean, to be totally transparent, I went kicking and screaming the whole way, right? Because as soon as I restore weight, everyone's going to go away.
yeah.
Remember, because this is what makes me lovable. This is what makes me enough. So I don't want to give it up because then I'll be alone again. Do you remember what that was like? Does anybody
Mm,
remember? Like that was I can't go back there, right? But I think I think for me, maybe a year and a half or so into it, when I realized that not only were people not leaving me, but the quality of my relationships was better. I was able to be present with these people and actually feel loved.
yeah.
But I would argue as well, it was the first time I'd been through any kind of therapeutic process either, where I was doing some inner work and
Hmm.
learning what surrender even was, and that I
Yeah.
didn't have to fight all the time. And it was okay to relax my guard. And maybe I wasn't like an extraordinary unicorn piece of crap. Maybe I was just like a normal one, like everybody else. And like maybe I have a little hope here. And I think when I started to see a difference in the again like the quality of my connection
Hmm.
with other humans, I think I was like, yeah, I think I actually want this. I think I like this.
Yeah. One of the, I think, most powerful pieces in speaking about that is um, in sharing our recovery story is because, you know, on the other side, pre initiation of recovery, people thinking, hear stories that when we're, telling them and things like that, going, and even at the very beginning, going, okay, sure, yeah, whatever. But a lifestyle like you're talking, this is going to be the rest of my life.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Right. And this is the part where I think is the opportunity to say do a reality check and
Mhm.
also find hope because it doesn't come immediately,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Surrender has to happen.
Every
Full
day,
surrender has to happen.
every
But
day.
yeah,
Mhm.
but that pivotal moment where you switch from having feeling like you're having to do it to wanting to do it
Mhm.
and finding joy. We have glimpses here and there, but for everybody it's different and it's somewhere different along the way, but it always comes.
Yes. Yes.
And so that's where the hope is.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why I love asking that question, because it's so different for everybody and
Mhm.
it's important to talk
I
about.
think it is important to talk about, and I want anyone listening too who might be going through, their own recovery journey. Being in recovery doesn't mean that you never have a bad day again. Being in recovery doesn't ever mean that you're not tempted to use old ways to cope.
Mhm.
That's being human, right? Being in recovery means that you have to me, it means I have the strength, the wisdom, and the resources to continue to put one foot in front of the other, going in the direction I want to go, even when things are hard. Now I'm
Yeah.
equipped to handle it.
Hmm. So good. Um, so you were mentioning that you went through school, worked hard, got the things you figured out what you wanted to do with your life to that would feed you and what have you, and no pun intended. But
Literally and figuratively.
right. Um, and so I think it's so cool. Not, a lot of us don't necessarily know right away and what have you, but you had this path you set on it. And my goodness, have you done amazing things since, finishing your schooling and affected so many people's lives? One of the biggest blessings, I think, in our community is the nonprofit organization you serve as the clinical director for,
Yeah.
called Renewed. And so I wondered if you might share a little bit about the history
Oh
of
my gosh.
that and what
It's
you
incredible.
all do
Actually, the hot doctor, Dr. Bermudez, founded
there.
that nonprofit. And I became very involved with that pretty quickly in my recovery. It's such an awesome way to give back and offer free resources to people who are just kind of starting that journey, to not feel so alone. And so we do tons of different free support groups. They're in person and virtual. So we can reach a nationwide audience for support, and they're all free. My main role there is to educate clinicians on how to treat eating disorders. So any clinicians who want to brush up on the latest research, or maybe they don't treat eating disorders, but they want to start, we offer so many educational resources for counselors and nutritionists who want to work with this population. And then we do a huge conference as well to train. But then probably my heart is I help folks find resources for treatment. So people who just sort of realize maybe they have a problem, they don't know what it is. They know something's going on with food and eating in their world. They can call and I can talk to them and figure out a course of action. I can find people who take their insurance. I can find people in their community. I can find people who meet certain criteria that they want. Maybe it's a spiritual based program they want. Maybe it's secular. So connecting people to resources is definitely my heart. I remember how lost I felt over 20 years ago, and I don't ever want and alone. And I never want anybody to feel that way if I can help it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I just wanted to mention here, so ask about how people can get connected for two reasons. Because A, if they're watching and they say, hey, I think that sounds like something that might really help me, how they can get hooked up with you all. But B, if you're watching and say, that sounds like a really cool organization and I'd like to somehow get connected and be involved. It's a nonprofit, so people can donate, right? To
Absolutely.
support the cause. So how can people, where's the connecting point? What's the website? How can people get connected with Renewed?
Yeah, check out our website. There's a whole bunch of different ways to plug in, whether to donate, volunteer, join a group, whatever you would like to do. It's renewedsupport.org. And so everything, our programs, our volunteer opportunities, everything is right there.
Very cool. So gosh, I just love that program so much. It has a special place in my heart.
Me too.
So you, as a therapist, also have put to use your experience, skills, and expertise in a really cool area of building this program called The Collective. And I would love for you to share a little bit more about that.
Thank you. And we are down on Music Row. Poetically enough, it is a little treatment program that we put together for depression and anxiety. And we're doing it through a social lens health. So just as I described, being so isolated and being so lonely, and how my mental illness just took off in that vacuum. We don't really get sick outside of or in a vacuum, but we can't get well in a vacuum, right? So it takes community. It takes being seen and loved and heard. So it's social health platform to treat depression and anxiety. And what's really cool is that we're able to work with, eating disorders, addiction, all kinds of things show up to manage that depression, anxiety, and trauma. And we can work with all of those things kind of peripherally as well.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So how can they get connected with you for that?
So if there's anything we can do, we've got nurse practitioners and dietitians, group work, massage, family therapy, all kinds of things included in the program. It's mycollectivecare.com. So reach out if there's anything that we can do for you at all.
Very cool. Thank you so much. All right. So I want to ask you a last question that I like to ask everybody, to that person that is watching or listening, that has really related to your story and is struggling or questioning whether or not maybe they're like you, or the old you pre-recovery. What piece of encouragement, what would you like to leave with them as a last?
Oh my gosh, just reach out. Just reach out. Don't let that shame stop you the way it stopped me for so long. anything that you think, feel, anything you're going through, you're not the only one. Even though it really, really seems like you are, I promise you that you're not. Just reach out. Connection is everything. It's absolutely everything. And you don't have to do this by yourself.
Amen. Oh, that's so good. So true. I get so encouraged and excited about when doing these stories, and anybody who watches these regularly hears me say this a lot, because I do. When we record them, they feed my soul. And I'm so grateful for people like you that are brave enough to come on and share publicly, because we need it.
Yeah. Thank you for having a space where we can share. Thank you for even realizing how important it is to talk to each other. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Well, the final thought I want to leave with everybody, I try and remember to say every week, is that it is never too late to start loving yourself, and you're only one decision away from a completely different life. So with that, I'll say thank you again to everybody watching and listening. And thanks, Courtney. Y'all have a great day.
Thank you.
For more information on today's episode, check out the show notes. Recovery Stories is brought to you by Promises Behavioral Health's rooted alumni community. If you or a loved one are struggling, have questions, or ready to take the next step, call our admission center at 888-648-4098. Or visit us online at www.promisesbehavioralhealth.com. Our team is ready and waiting to answer the call for help. Whether you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please share with your friends. Follow, subscribe, and leave us a review. We are grateful for you and hope that you have been encouraged by today's episode. As always, remember you are only one decision away from a completely different life, and it is never too late to start loving yourself.